The first question, by luck of the draw, goes to Mr. Perrone first, and it is, what are your top 3 legislative priorities?
Well, thank you very much. My name is Chris Perrone. It's great to be here. I appreciate everybody coming out on a night like this. The deal is that say 6 years ago we had a debate in this chamber, and maybe there were about 6 or 8 people. I'm seeing a lot more tonight, and I think that shows you the kind of times that we're in. Everybody really wants to understand, what's going on in their government, in their state government. My priorities really are, they center around transportation, they center around healthcare, and they focus on, to a large degree, education, retraining our workforce to make sure that we are training our up and coming generations for jobs in manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and other areas. So it's really those 3 priorities.
Okay, Mr. Page.
Thank you. I understood we do an opening statement too? Or?
Just the closing.
Can I put that closing? Okay, no problem. I'll work that in, opening statement. How about that too? But my 3 priorities were, transportation, also to drive economic development, and, funding this with a set of general obligation bonds. Also, education funding. Norwalk continues to get shortchanged, and also it's impossible to fix our budget without pension reform. And I'll just go to the opener. I had prepared an opener, but thanks for all coming out. Special thanks to the League of Women Voters for facilitating this forum, and their guide for candidates. Democracy is truly not a spectator sport. I think I speak for many Norwalkers when I say the results of the November election will have drastic consequences for my future in Connecticut, as well as for my friends and family's future. Because the stakes of this election involve Connecticut's ongoing fiscal crisis, the specter of more tax increases, and the availability of good jobs in the state, I decided I couldn't sit on the sidelines as my opponent sought re-election. Connecticut is in desperate need of new ideas and new leadership, which is why I put myself forward as a candidate for state representative to offer Norwalkers a viable alternative and change. I'm a Norwalk native who cares deeply for the community, and my campaign is about hope for the future, creative ideas to reform state government, and fighting for their prioritization of education funding and transportation funding. Voters who pay attention have learned in the past 2 years that the preferred solution of Connecticut's ruling party remains the same as it has been the past 8 years, to tax our way into prosperity while reducing the services we rely on. In both 2017-18 legislative sessions, budgets are proposed to solve this budget deficit with additional sales taxes, new taxes on cell phones, restaurant taxes, et cetera, et cetera. If there's one message I want to convey to Norwalk voters, it's that this does not need to be the way forward in our state. We do not and cannot tax and toll our way back to prosperity.
All right, Mr. Perrone, any rebuttal or extension?
No, that'll come out during the debate. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Page, anything further?
Oh, no.
Okay, thank you both. Next question goes to Mr. Page first. What specific policies would you support to keep Connecticut fiscally sound for years to come? And how do you propose dealing with the state's unmet pension obligations?
That's great. Fiscally sound going forward. Again, I think people that know me know I'm a business person, not a career politician. So again, I like to look at things line by line, or the same thing when you're looking at a company in a merger and acquisition situation. If a division's not prosperous, you have to look at each an individual portion of that division to make sure it's profitable. And I say that we do the same thing with the state of Connecticut. And I'm sorry, the second portion again, Jan?
Yes. How do you propose dealing with the state's unmet pension obligations?
Yeah. Unmet pension liability, I mean, when I went up to Hartford, they said, I said, when does the state become illiquid? People are telling me 7 or 8 years. So obviously that's something we have to look at. I mean, unfunded pension liability, we're signed up for 2027, but that's something we have to take a hard look at also.
Okay, Mr. Perrone?
The Special Transportation Fund is becoming a larger and larger drain on our finances. The gas tax, it's funded primarily by the gas tax. That revenue is dropping because of hybrids and other fuel-efficient vehicles. So what we're left with is the debt service generated by road projects and road projects and the declining revenue. The concern here, and this is something y'all have to watch, is that this fund, as it shrinks and as it's likely to go insolvent in the next couple of years, will in fact put a drain on, I believe, will put a drain on the general fund. And I think this gets into dangerous waters, because that affects healthcare, education, and a lot of the other concerns we have. You were talking about traffic lights before. Part of traffic lights are funded by LOCIP, which is it's a state program that municipalities use. So it's going to hit everybody if we don't address this. And that's about a year and a half ago I was put in to oversee the funding of that. So that's been a big focus of mine. So this is. If we don't address that, I think that we're going to get hit twice. I agree that we need to work on our pension program, our unfunded pensions, because you're going to get hit. Otherwise, we're going to get hit with this special transportation fund possibly imploding, and then you have the pension fund issue. So these do have to be a priority. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Page, anything further?
Sure. Yeah, the only traffic light I'm worried about is the stoplight on spending, to tell you the truth. I mean, we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem in the state of Connecticut. But regarding the transportation, it comes up, the transportation lockbox, you mentioned the amendment that's on there. Again, I'm worried that this will be continuously, rated and not indeed used for transportation.
Okay, Mr. Perone, anything further?
Well, I think that's fair. I think the lockbox is a big deal. I feel that we are. We can't gain any trust and can't build a real support for any policy if people don't trust us not to spend the money if whatever we raise in transportation. So the whole issue of the lockbox, I think, is important, and it's really the only way we can have a rational conversation going forward as to what's what's the best way to fund transportation.
Okay, thank you both.
Got the red card, okay?
That's red card, yes. Next question goes to Mr. Perone first. What is your position on gun legislation? Specifically, should Connecticut remain an open carry state, and should Connecticut ban ghost guns?
I am certainly not a supporter of ghost guns, only because of just their nature. They're impossible to trace. I think that they have their limitations on that. I mean, I think that if you want to purchase a gun, and the normal fashion. As far as carry, it's not an issue I've openly fought against. I think my concern about guns really are we doing what we need to do to make sure that we're protecting public health by making sure that we're not giving guns to people that are that really maybe have some backgrounds that aren't conducive to safe use of a gun. But more the bigger issue, when Sandy Hook happened and Parkland and some of the other things happened, some of my first questions were, what are we doing for public or doing for mental health? What are we doing to make sure that kids coming up through the system get the treatment and the intervention they need to make sure that they are not doing any, their conditions aren't getting worse, and therefore, what are we doing to identify people who may take up guns? I don't have a position on the carry law. It's not something that's really come up as an issue down here, but I think we are, as we get into that debate, I'm ready to talk to both sides and make sure that we put in the best policy that's going to keep people safe. That's what I want at the end of the day.
Okay, Mr. Page.
Thank you. Connecticut's an open carry state. You're allowed to carry in the state of Connecticut. We also have some of the most stringent gun laws. That said, and kind of further, we're a state where it's tougher to get your CDL and your motorcycle license than it is to get a carry permit. And most enthusiasts I know, they're all for that. They like that. They're responsible. We have a gun safety issue. But again, getting back to the licensing, most people who go there, that guy kind of goes to the point Chris said of mental health, which I'm all for those checks and background checks, to go that way. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Perone, anything further? Okay, Mr. Page, anything further?
No.
Okay, thank you both. Next question goes to Mr. Page first. Are you concerned about Connecticut's current cybersecurity safeguards for our elections? If yes, in what ways should our systems be improved? If not, why not?
I haven't heard of any cyber attacks. It was interesting, Channel 8 ran something on cyber more at the local, I think, national level. I don't think we've had any, Russians infiltrating into Connecticut election areas. But again, as long as we have the proper security in place, I'm fine with that. Again, and also on election day, if that comes into the reporting of results and with the additional of machines that we have, that could be something that could be looked at. But other than that, I'm fine with it.
Okay, Mr. Perone, same question?
Oh, thank you. I think, I subscribe to the notion that anything that can be encrypted can eventually be hacked. I'm worried that we are not, we're okay now. I think we have a good backup system with our ballots. We have a paper ballot backup that has to be produced by law every time there's an election. So we have this record. That said, I think that looking, understanding. Several years ago, I did a task force on the national level about what states are doing to protect themselves in the area of cybersecurity, and we found that many states are just lacking in having real top-notch talent at the top that's overseeing their overall cybersecurity, health, protecting data, protecting all the records that millions of records that states generate on all its citizens. And I think part of it is a talent thing. I think that basically, the talent makes more in the private sector, and I think that that's a real challenge for us. So, but that said, it's our state. I think what I'd like to see, our cybersecurity is strengthened and the targets hardened as much as possible. Infrastructure, water supply, electrical grid, and other areas. So we are. In general, we're not vulnerable to cyber attacks. As it relates to specifically to election security, I think we're good, but always got to be vigilant because technology improves hourly, and there are more rogue actors out there in the world that just, it's not all about Russia. There are plenty of just independent contractors that want to do harm. So we just have to be ready.
Okay. Anything further on that, Mr. Page? Okay. Anything further, Mr. Perone?
Nothing.
Okay. Thank you. Next question goes to Mr. Perone first. Do you support either in-person early voting and/or expanded use of absentee ballots for mail-in voting?
I think the voting every Tuesday, the first Tuesday of every month it's a concept that worked then. I think that we are expected to roll with how the needs of our electorate, and but I hear when I go to doors, why can't I vote online? Why can't I vote by carrier pigeon? Why can't I vote different ways? The carrier pigeon bill is not going to pass, I guarantee it. But it's really, how can the polls be more accessible to people with busy lives? Running between 3 different locations, dropping kids off everywhere. It's people get very busy. So what can we do? The state government is basically a service business. We're trying to make our we're trying to improve lives, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're not going overboard to we want fair, stable elections where everybody's vote is cast within reason. I support the two concepts. I think though that this is something that we're definitely going to discuss. But that's my answer.
Okay, Mr. Page, same question.
Thanks. Again, on the outside, anything that can help to get more voter turnout. We're at 20-30% rates. Anything you can do to improve that is good. That said, we have a 14-hour time frame with the 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. We also have the absentee ballot set up to do that. So there is time. We can look at, I'm all for taking a look at it. I mean, we have a lot of other things to look at in the state of Connecticut, but if we can vote to put the right people in office, that will help. And maybe it could be over a couple-day period, not a 2 or 3 week or a month period. Online, we talked to, tie back to the cybersecurity question. I mean, that's just, rife with an opportunity, for fraud there. So again, if we can stay with the traditional, in that 14-hour time frame and the absentee ballots, you can see in Norwalk, Rick McQuaid's done a heck of a job as town clerk to open it up, to have people come in there on Saturday, for extra hours to get absentee, ballots. When, I haven't missed an election when I was 18, but traveled for a lot. I probably have to file absentee ballot, 20 some odd times in my career. And if you want to do it, you will do it. But I think the underlying question is getting more people to actually want to vote. Again, you have additional time for them to vote. That makes them, maybe that'll make them want to vote, or takes down one of the barriers that they have to not vote.
Mr. Perone, anything further?
Just a touch base on one thing. Just an example to give you a sense of scale. A friend of mine has worked in a very large insurance company here in the state of Connecticut in IT security, and he told me one time that on any given day they get at least 10,000 inquiries or attempts to penetrate their security. That's just one insurance company on one day. So when you extrapolate that across all the other reasons okay, I think you get the point. You got a red card. I got stopped like a good cybersecurity system wall with
Okay.
firewall.
Mr. Page, anything further on that?
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you both. Next question goes to Mr. Page first. State funds were invested in the stalled Wall Street Place development. What would be a good outcome for that project, and what would you do as state legislator to bring it about?
I'm sorry, one more time?
Yes, state funds were invested in the stalled Wall Street Place development. What would be a good outcome for that project, and what would you do as a state legislator to bring it about?
That's a great question. And again, I'm a resident of Central Norwalk and can walk to that location owned by, POCO. It goes back to, the city's finally put, some blight on that. Citibank has taken, responsibility, or they will be, they're going to be receiving a $150 fine for each day with blight under that. So maybe that'll give some impetus to move. As maybe some of you may or may not know, the other parts of that POCO were purchased by a local developer, Jason Milligan, who's already started to clean up that area. But again, it's affectionately known as the Tyvek Temple in town for any of you in downtown Wall Street. And we have to do something with that project. Again, anything we could do at the state level to help the people of Norwalk to do that. There's some things tied into there. That's unusual in that it's got 40% low income tie-in as opposed to 10%, which is the norm. So that's why a lot of people won't touch that project. But again, that's the key. I'm all for South Norwalk. While we're talking about that, let's put a train station in there too. I'm pro train station for the Central Norwalk while we're talking about development and everything. They funded one from Hartford to Springfield, so I think maybe we can do one down in Wall Street in Norwalk.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Perone, same question.
Thank you. In the last budget, I was able to put some money towards the studying the feasibility of a train station in the Wall Street area. If you look at Wall Street, if you look at West Ave, and it's very scattered, not scattered, but spread out. So I think that we need to focus our thinking on the Wall Street area and look at it in terms of transit-oriented development, which means developing an area not only that is a transit hub, but also housing, also retail, and just really focus our attention in a way that builds that area. So, I support where I think there's a multiplier effect in investing in projects that are going to bring a return for the area. I think that it remains to be seen how profitable these ventures are. But look, there's been varying levels of varying degrees of success for that area since 1955, and I think that we have to make it a priority of ours. And I think that the mayor and his office and the legislators working with the city leaders to try to keep a spotlight on this area, to try to improve this area, is a very worthy goal, and look forward to make that development happen.
Okay, Mr. Page, anything further?
Sure, just to extend, I mean, we had a meeting at the Wall Street Theater with all the area, folks involved, and again, it was great. We had the head of Harbor Project where, Descal and Company's done a great job, and if you talk to all the individual shop owners and folks down there, it's just been great. They said, it's a density issue. We get more dense, we get more folks living there. It's great for the small business. It's great for the city of Norwalk. It's great for the 137th Connecticut State Legislature.
I'm sorry. Anything further, Mr. Perone?
I agree. We're good on this.
Okay. Next question goes to Mr. Perone first. If elected, what will your strategy be to obtain more education funding for Norwalk?
I think it's got to be looked at in a couple of ways. I think that we are, in the last budget, we worked on trying to accelerate funding for distressed municipalities. I think that we need to make sure that happens. But also, I think that as we get funding, it's what are we doing with funding that's going to have a great outcome for our kids. And I think that looking at things like putting money into apprenticeships, into things like NECA and giving kids skills, marketable skills that they can then take with them as they graduate, and they can decide if they want to go into either IT or other tech sector occupations. I think is laudable. I think our overall pressure, our overall strength is as a delegation is when we all push to make this happen. I think that the fact is we are the city the size we are. Other municipalities have a larger delegation, so I think we tend to stick together pretty well on education and education funding. But it's we have to fight for every dollar. There's no easy way to do it, but we are committed to doing it because Norwalk has been trending up the last several years. I mean, I think there's a lot more development, more families are moving in, and we have to continue. We have to reflect that success through doing all we can to improve our education system, and that means making sure that we are pushing every day to make sure we have the funding for our schools, and that's which is why I supported the changes to the funding in the last budget.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Same question.
Thank you. The nice thing when you can get a public-private partnership to do one of these things to help our educational funding, that's great. In Norwalk, we're fortunate to have the program with the Norwalk schools, and I believe IBM helps behind it, where you can get a high school degree and a 2-year associate's at the same time. I mean, what an awesome program to have. We only have, I think, a dozen or so students taking advantage of it now, but that'll grow as the program matures. But getting back to the funding, I'm always worried about Norwalk's fair share and how we get lumped in. We're DRG, which is a district reference group, or DRG-H, where I think I is the last amount, right?
Yeah.
So if we get in there, we have almost 50% of our folks on funded lunches. So again, we have to make sure we get our equitable share. I mean, Chris has been up there a lot of years. I mean, he can tell you that ECS, when somebody can figure out how that, even as a business person, it's fairly convoluted, how they come up with that. But again, anything that can help Norwalk and pro education. I was fortunate to be invited over to FRC program, Hispanic Cultural, which is over at Fox Run School. Again, FRC is a program funded by the state, and just in our Hispanic area, there were 21 countries represented. So again, we have to look out for everybody in Norwalk and to get the proper funding.
Before I ask for rebuttal on this question, I have been told to ask both candidates to speak louder and closer to the mic.
Okay.
All right. A rebuttal on this? Any rebuttal, Mr. Perot?
Just really quickly, and because NECA was brought up, in 2013, I'd heard about this program that was going on in New York State where IBM was teaming up with some of the local high schools in New York State to bring in, to train kids in IT, in addition to their high school programs, their high school diploma. So I basically pushed like heck and got with the governor's help just to get the first NECA program in Norwalk, in the state of Connecticut. And I'm proud of that. My son is actually. I like the yellow one better.
Sorry.
My son's a member, or he's in it now, and the program's doing very well.
Time, I'm afraid. Mr. Page, anything further on this?
That's fine. I'm glad with his involvement with NECA, and I'm not sure if Chris escorted Ivanka around when she came in with the NECA program at IBM. No, I figured you're taking credit for the NECA, so I figured you did.
I was out of town.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Next question goes to Mr. Page first. If elected, would you vote for or against highway tolls, and why?
Again, we haven't seen a plan. We've been waiting to see a plan on tolls. Again, I talked about that, in my opener a little bit, and then probably a little bit in the close. But again, I firmly believe, we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem, and tolls are not the magic wand. I mean, again, if we saw a plan at some point, that would be nice first, so we could comment and speak intelligently on it. But that said, going out and talking to the majority of my constituents, a lot of small businessmen, I mean, from oil service companies to duct cleaning companies, everything that have, multiple, people on the road, and and they said, is it really true there's going to be 14 tolls from Greenwich to West Haven, and it's going to cost the same amount that it would cost to go from Metro New York to Buffalo? We haven't seen a plan. So again, you can't say the comment intelligently on it. But also, I want, the person that works, the admin assistant, that commutes down to Norwalk to work, that's going to be burdened by X amount. Again, we don't know the amount, but it's going to be another dollar amount. To me, it's another tax. I mean, you could call it a user fee. That's what people call user fee. I mean, that's a fancy word for tax. We have a state income tax. We pay taxes on our vehicle. We have one of the highest gasoline taxes in the country. So, come on. No, I'm against it.
Okay, can I ask the audience to please keep it quiet up there? Same question to Mr. Perone.
Well, thank you. I think this is one of the areas that we do. We agree on a lot of things in Hartford, but this one area is definitely contentious. And I think that Mr. Page is right. If we're going to have a conversation about whether or not we should do tolls, we have to have the research. We have to understand what the plan would be. The majority, the Democratic Party, has been pushing to get that done, that study done and started, and it's gotten shot down. We've been basically fighting over this. I think you really can't go forward without a plan, and I think that's one of the areas. I think that's it's just that was it was disappointing in the last session that we didn't get that through because. Folks, the longer we wait on transportation infrastructure spending, and this is what we're getting into, We are dealing with a situation, we have 332 roads that have to be brought up to a state of good repair in the state of Connecticut. We have these priority projects that are going to make Connecticut more efficient. I think, frankly, good infrastructure is the backbone of our economy. But unless we can invest in infrastructure, we can't move our state forward in a way that's competitive with all the other states around us that have made transportation funding a priority. So it's like, I think that we all have to find common ground to say, okay, we're going to study what we want to do for different funding mechanisms and the needs for transportation. But then I'll get behind something, because otherwise we are going to continue to lose ground to the surrounding states. I mean, look, 30% of the traffic that comes through on I-95 is from out of state. It's like, these people pay nothing to improve our roads. I mean, maybe we should look at them. But unless we have a study, unless we have done the analysis, we can't. We're stuck in the mud, and that's a problem.
Any rebuttal, Mr. Page?
Sure. I mean, it was real disappointing, on the toll study that that you didn't come out. My opponent didn't come out against that. But again, we don't need a study. We don't need a $10 million study. That's for sure. I think we can all agree on that. I mean, again, that's pretty close to 30 seconds, I think, right?
Yeah, that's it. Okay, Mr. Perrone, anything further?
But we could talk about the price tag of the study, but at the end of the day, we have to ask these questions. And as a state, as a citizenry, what are we going to do to move our state forward? This study was part of that process. So there's nothing nefarious about it. But it was information that we needed to have in order to move forward, and we don't have. So this is obviously going to be something that's going to be revisited. And I'm all ears if I get reelected to get your viewpoint.
All right, and that is.
Do you have a double rebuttal or no?
No.
Okay, just
She has a plaid.
All right, okay.
All right.
Just checking.
My problem on this is that we have a number of really good questions, but I've also been told that I have to wrap up and go to closing statements in 2 minutes. So I'm going to ask that each of you on this next question take just a minute for the answer, and then we're going to go to closings. Sure. The question will go to Mr. Perrone first. Many of Connecticut's middle-class workers do not have access to employer-sponsored health benefit plans and do not receive enough help from the Affordable Care Act subsidies to afford Connecticut's high cost for health insurance premiums and out-of-pocket expenses. If elected, how are you going to ensure affordable access to health care benefits for all of Connecticut's citizens?
I think that excuse me. I think that we made good progress on the cost of prescription drugs in the last session, but I think that this is something that the cost of prescription drugs are outrageous. That has to be something that's certainly a middle ground for a lot of folks to if we don't, it's a good area because it hits so many lives. So I think that's one area, but I think that we are on the state level, the areas of Obamacare that have made a positive impact. I think we have to make sure that we support that, and but we have to continue to work to make sure that the cost of healthcare access doesn't get out of control, but also to continue to look for new ways to improve people's access to care.
Okay, Mr. Page, 1 minute.
Thanks.
Same thing.
Prescription health care is just part of it. It's affordable. I'm all for keeping programs intact, like Connecticut and things like that have helped. A lot of constituents that I talk to are independent contractors in the 137th Connecticut State Legislature, and they count on programs like this to have affordable health care for their family. So, that's definitely a positive.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we are going to go to the closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes. There will not be rebuttals. By luck of the draw, Mr. Page gets the first close.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your attention this evening, and thanks again to the League of Women Voters for organizing and moderating this event. I also like to thank my opponent for his service. You've done quite enough. Thank you.
Oh, we can have some fun.
Over the past 150 days since nominated, I've been extremely fortunate to speak to constituents in the 137th District. From early morning commuters at the East Norwalk train station to a woman on Ward Street that had never received a candidate visit in her family's 15 years residing there. What seems to resonate for all is that they are ready for change. Page for change. They're tired of increases taxes and decreasing home values. They are in desperate need for new ideas and new leadership. This election is your chance to exercise your vote for change. Let a businessman, not a career politician, pioneer that change. We have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. This is a critical election. I'm a Norwalk native who is passionate about this community. While I look back with fond memories of growing up in the 137th District, right on Burlington Drive with my almost, can I say 80-something-year-old mother? Okay. But, and again, still reside in the district. My brother and his family live in the district. I mean, we bleed Norwalk. We bleed the 137th District. But I look to the future with hope. You know, hope for the future. I look forward to fighting for Norwalk's fair share in Hartford and represent all the residents of the 137th. But whatever you do, you know, we're wearing these voting badges. Please exercise your right to vote on November 6th. We're truly blessed to live in the greatest country in the world.
Thank you. Mr. Perone.
Well, thank you very much, and I also want to thank the League of Women Voters. I just want to thank all of you for coming out. I think that when I knock on doors, I think people, as soon as you start talking about politics, the energy just drains from them. I think people are spent in a lot of ways. I think that they're concerned about where this country is going, but this isn't a partisan thing. It's just a question of how are we getting to priorities that people really care about? How are we talking about education, healthcare, energy costs that aren't going through the roof? So people want to talk about these issues at their doors, and it's been the honor of my life to do what I can to try to take what I hear when I knock on doors and turn it into policy that I think matters. I think that our focus on making support for small business has been with access to capital to get them going. It's been good. It's been my efforts have been recognized. I've been endorsed by CBIA. They feel that my approach has been good on that. I think there's but there are also some lurking costs on the healthcare side that are going to impact families, caregivers. I'm certainly concerned about what we're doing to make sure that caregivers and families have adequate access to health care and in the area of okay, I'll wrap it up. But look, overall, I feel very positive about the state of Connecticut's future, but we can't get to this positive future unless we plan for it. That means having a real open and honest discussion on transportation, how we're going to develop our infrastructure, how we're going to develop housing to keep our young people here, tying business and education and government, that together to make sure that we are developing our business community and our education system to work off each other to develop our economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't forget to vote.